past lives are really interesting. They're really fun. I love anything to do with past lives. Unfortunately, though, the only time that you really need to do some kind of past life regression is when either you got a literal part of your soul that's splintered off, and you need to mend it, bring it back and mend it so that your soul is whole again, or you've got chakras that are imbalanced, which is kind of the same thing. It's heavily related to chakras either way, but basically you realize that nothing in this current life has caused that, and so that it must be in a past life. Most of us, we've had not just a couple dozen past lives, but hundreds, if not thousands and thousands and thousands of past lives. There are younger souls, there are older souls, but there are very few souls that they just have one life so far. Very few. The universe is so old by now that is so. Most of us have had at least hundreds of past lives. We couldn't possibly remember them all, and so you only have to remember the lives that you need in order to heal whatever, in order to mend whatever you need to mend. Anything else is irrelevant, and anything else you're not supposed to remember. Another reason why you might have to remember a past life is because maybe you have something that, like a fear or something, that is literally ruining your life. You're born with it, but you have absolutely no reason to fear it. You have nothing in your life to make you fear something, nothing to make. So say you have a fear of ponds, but there's been nothing ever that you would ever fear about ponds, in this life. Well, maybe in a past life, maybe you drowned in a pond, So basically, to mend something, you have to find out when, where, and why it broke in the beginning. You cannot repair something if you don't know exactly what broke and when and why. Once you find it and locate it, then you can take that piece of you, and most often than not is a literal piece of your soul. A literal, especially if it's chakra work. It's a literal piece of your soul that you are taking back. It's a shattered, mangled, but literal piece of your soul that you're taking back and then bringing to the present to mend and have it become a part of the rest of your soul. If you have a big enough piece that's shattered off, like say an entire chakra, if you have most or entire chakra that's splintered off and it stays like that for too long, if it stays separate from your soul for too long, it will eventually die. But that is extreme cases. Typically you're able to find it and mend it. It's shattered, it's wounded, but it's still alive and you can still mend it. It takes a lot of work, but typically it's not so far gone that it's actually dead. If it's dead, you really can't do that much about it. And typically there's people that have let it die, have done so on purpose. They don't even want it. That's people say it's your heart. The last thing they want is a heart because they like not having one. I don't understand why, but that's just kind of how it goes. So sometimes you also, last thing that I can think of for doing past life, you also need to remember a past life or a few past lives in order to remember who you really are, the core of who you really are. Some of us have gotten so distant from who we really are that we don't know who we are and we kind of lose ourselves. And finding out who we really are, sometimes the only way to do that is to know who we've been. Because who we've been, I'm not talking about mistakes, I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about the core of who we've been is usually who we are and who we will be. All souls have a core, and that core typically does not change. So if this is the core of who you are, then it's there somewhere, unless you've drastically changed it, which is possible. But even if you've changed a part of you, usually you can't change you completely, because souls are like basically snowflakes. I mean, there's only one of you. They're individual, they're unique, and the core of who they are, the kind of things you like, the kind of things that you do, what you're good at, the things that you are just naturally have a gift for, the kind of things that you believe, how you think, a lot of that is what makes you you. And so if you change too much, then you're kind of not you anymore. That being said, souls can sometimes shift and change. So anyway, how do you go about doing something like this? Well, there's a few ways. I'll highly advise against anyone that is telling you that blatantly and persistently that you cannot go to your own past life regression and they have to do it for you, and that you can't be the one to be in the trance, that they have to do it, that they have to be the ones to go there and get your soul and bring it back to you, and you have to trust that they're not going to keep it for themselves and they're going to actually give it back to you. I'd highly advise against that, because that's a red flag. I know from sad experience. Before I knew anything about magic, before I learned anything, before I started learning paganism, way before that, I actually had an unfortunate run-in with somebody that did a past life regression for me like that. And instead of bringing back a piece of my soul, they stole even more of my soul. And I had already known how to tell that something was wrong and that this person was not to be trusted. But the problem was, back then I did not trust myself. So back then I thought it was just my post-traumatic stress getting the best of me and me being paranoid of somebody. So unfortunately the only time to be paranoid is at the time that I wasn't, and I walked out of there and I felt like a shell. I had no emotion, no nothing. And it took me a long time to reverse it, because I had to first learn, and then I had to understand what had happened. So I reversed what she did, and I also did a lot of fun war magic that I won't talk about, but just trust me, it was fun. And then, just if you're going to have someone help you, just make sure that you know first, that you've learned first. To fully trust someone, you have to have, in my opinion, a fact, that magic wise, you've looked into their soul and you know that they're pure intent. And if you don't know how to do that, then I don't think you can have a way of fully trusting anyone. That's just me. But you're not really supposed to. You're supposed to do everything you put in your power to help them do it themselves. And then if all else fails, then maybe you would go and do it for them, but only if they're just having an extreme block and can't do it on their own. Most times people can eventually do it on their own. And you need to let them. So if anyone's insisting not to, that's usually a red flag. So bad thing about doing it on your own though. Bad thing about not having someone guide you through it. Bad thing about not having anyone to bring you into the trance and take you out of the trance. means that you have to rely on that yourself. And when you're in the trance, it's really, really, really easy to get stuck there. You're basically doing astral work. You've got a tether to your body, but your soul is traveling to other realms. And it's easy to get lost there. It's easy for that tether to break if you don't know what you're doing. The easiest way that I know of, if you're doing it by yourself, I mean, yes, you can always, ask your spirit guides or totems or something to help bring you back. But the easiest way, that takes the least amount of training, still takes some training, but takes the least amount of training, is some kind of song. Music is a very powerful influencer. And so there are certain songs that are specifically sacred pagan songs that are specifically designed to take somebody deep into a trance. And then there are other sacred pagan songs that are specifically designed to take someone out of that trance and reverse it. Songs are very, very influential. And they work pretty flawlessly. You just have to train yourself that even when you're in the trance, as part of that tether is having a conscious saying, I'm listening for this song. Otherwise you could get so deep into it that you forget that you have a present life, that you forget, because it feels like that's your present life. The past life that you're in starts feeling like your present life, so you don't want to do that. Typically it helps to have a time limit. It helps to have a time limit and not try to do everything in one time. That way it forces you to come out of it at a certain time. And what you can do is you can have a recording of that song that takes you in, and a recording of that song that brings you out. Also a rattle, a sacred rattle. I don't mean a baby rattle, but a sacred pagan rattle can pretty easily help somebody that's stuck get unstuck. I won't say it's flawless, but rattles are pretty well known for doing that. Rattles are just kind of what they're used for. They're used to break up some kind of really dense magic. They're used to end things. They're used to break up and end things. So it's hard to explain, but they disperse any kind of heaviness, and that deep trance-like state is a very deep heaviness. So they'll disperse that and it'll wake you up, usually. So you could have even a recording of a rattle sound. Although I will say that the rattle in person is better. For whatever reason, I find that someone actually shaking a rattle for you in person is a lot more powerful, but it doesn't mean that it wouldn't work on a recording. Really, I think the song is the best. The song, an actual song, maybe even with a rattle, with it. Some people just set a timer, really. Some people just set a timer and then they listen for the timer and then boop, they're awake now. So it really just depends. Some people listen for a key word. It just depends. The last thing you want to do though is get stuck there. So sometimes you'll only have to remember a little blip, a little tiny section of a past life. Other times you'll have to keep going back and remembering more and more and more of it, until you finally fix everything that's shattered. I had one that was really easy that I didn't have to do much with at all, and then I had another one that I had to do a lot with, a lot. If you're deep enough, it can actually physically affect your body. That's to be mindful of as well. So if you remember dying and you're too deep, then you might actually physically have some, usually it's not severe or anything, but just thought I should probably mention that.